So I will switch to English and tell you about consciousness, or at least a little about what we know about consciousness. And today there is a lot of philosophical discussion on the topic of consciousness, and there has been for centuries what consciousness is, and to some extent the real problem that we want to try and solve in the pursuit of trying to make a scientific description of consciousness is to try and explain what's called phenomenal consciousness. So that's how we feel, for instance, the sensation of red, what it is that makes us sense something is red, and how can we be sure that the sensation that I have of red is the same as the sensation that you have of red? And that's this has been formulated in a lot of papers. One of them is the paper from 1974 by Nagel. That's called "What It's Like to Be a Bat," and it's simply trying to understand how a bat, which communicates with sounds, or which navigates with sounds, is able to actually experience the world, how that differs from the way that we experience the world, and then try and sort of, in a philosophical way, try to explain what it is that this bat feels, or how it's actually becoming conscious of its world, if it is so. Then there are a lot of theories that covers the whole aspect of consciousness, some are called higher order theories, and I will not go into details with them. Some are called global workspace theories. The global workspace theories works in around the concept that you cannot become consciously aware of something without you have a global network in the brain that's able to communicate with each other. Without that global network that covers both frontal and sensory areas, you cannot become conscious. And then there are some more sophisticated biological theories that are derived. Some claim that there are at least very small parts of the brain that are subserving consciousness. So some of these theories are called micro-consciousness, so that even down to a cellular level you can speak about consciousness, that the representation of, for instance, the perception of red is something that's coded in very few areas of the brain. Another question that's really interested the research of consciousness, also the experimental psychology research in consciousness, is how you can differentiate the sensation of, or the sort of common sense that, okay, I feel that I'm consciously aware of the presence, of my presence in this room, and I feel I'm consciously aware of you around here. And how can we then separate that feeling of me being aware of my surroundings and myself from other cognitive processes, such as my directed attention towards something? So how linked to attention is what I am consciously aware about at this moment? Also, there is a certain amount of information that I can cope with and become consciously aware of, which might be limited by how much I can actually have in my working memory. And then what is really the difference between just being consciously aware of something and perceiving something? So that's some of the questions that has been addressed and is trying to be addressed in both the philosophical literature on consciousness, but also in the more experimental literature on consciousness. One of the first experiments that really boosted the idea that you can actually separate some of these cognitive functions from consciousness was Sperling, who back in the 1960 developed this paradigm where you were presented with a number of letters like these in 3 rows with, for instance, 4 letters in each column. And then you asked these were briefly presented for somewhere around 50 milliseconds, so very brief visual stimulations with these 12 letters. And subjects were then asked to actually report how many of these letters that they perceived. And usually they could come up with somewhere between 3 and 5 of the letters that they were able to see. So roughly 1/3 of the letters they were able to report. Then they made a separate experiment where, after they had presented these for a very brief period of time, they then randomly cued one of the lines, so either top one, the middle one, or the bottom one, but the subjects did not know before the experiments and before these letters were presented which of these rows were going to be cued. And in that case, subjects could almost report at least 3 of the 4 letters in this, regardless of which one it was. So in some ways, the experiment showed that there was information available that were not, when you had to report all of it, were able to gain access to your full consciousness. But when you cued one of the specific rows, then you actually became better at making this distinction, even though that you did not really have access, even though you did not know which of them were cued. So it was not like you knew that you were going to remember the first one, so you just remembered the first one, or the top one. So suggesting that something is available for consciousness, but it's not necessarily being accessed. So they tried also to make these distinctions between what you could actually have present as sensory information that you could then get access to through your consciousness. Whether that's then related to your visual attention or your attentional mechanisms is not really known. And it's still an experiment that's debated a lot in the literature.